You're listening to Motherhood in Between, the show for moms who want to rebuild their bodies, reclaim their energy, and keep pursuing the lives they're called to during the season between babies. I'm your host, Lauran Saunders, registered dietitian, mom of 2 and counting, and founder of Nourished Moms Collective. I help moms recover from their last pregnancy, prepare for their next one, and support their bodies and ambitions in the in-between season of motherhood. Because motherhood shouldn't mean depletion, and your dreams don't disappear when you become a mom. So whether you're rebuilding your health, rediscovering your identity, or growing something meaningful alongside your family, you're in the right place. Let's dive in. This third pregnancy feels a bit different, both emotionally and physically, than my previous pregnancies, and a lot of that is in a really good way. So in this episode, I want to go into all of the things that I did leading up to this pregnancy, because I really do think a reason why I'm feeling better now is because of the work that I put in while I was in between babies, really prioritizing my replenishment from my second pregnancy and in reality my first 2 pregnancies and breastfeeding, and how that has impacted this third experience. And I want to share both the practical side and the emotional side of having a third baby. Now, I want to start off with what has felt different in this pregnancy. Well, first and foremost, I have had less food aversions and better tolerance overall. So this is something that I did not experience in my first 2 pregnancies. When it came to taking my prenatal vitamins, by about week 6, I could not swallow pills. I switched to gummies or just powder. And half the time, I wasn't even taking a prenatal vitamin in my first trimester because I would always gag them or spit them out. This time, I'm actually still able to swallow vitamins and pills. I'm still able to eat eggs, which was a big no-no in both of my first 2 pregnancies. And I am able to eat meat. I haven't had any meat aversions, whereas in my first 2 pregnancies, chicken was a little iffy. If you know, you know. Now, I definitely still had some blah feeling, but not like intense disgust toward foods. This is actually kind of funny. An aversion that I did have was to my office. And that might sound so funny, but if you've experienced anything like this, you will know. I actually redid my office the week before I found out that I was pregnant. So right from the get-go, I had this new space. And as soon as I started feeling blah, I absolutely did not want to be in my office. I don't know if it just smelled a little weird, which I know it actually was normal. If there's one thing that I have learned with all 3 pregnancies, is that you do not want to introduce any new smells or products or things early on in pregnancy, because you will develop an aversion and you're never going to want that again. In fact, in my first pregnancy, we found out that we were pregnant when we were on a trip in Fiji. And while we were on that trip, I went to the spa. I had the most fantastic massage with the most delicious smelling body oil. I loved it. I bought 2 bottles to bring home with us. And by the time I was 6 weeks pregnant, I could not stand the smell. And to this day, I still cannot stand the smell of those products. I had gifted them to my mom, and every once in a while, she will wear them and I will smell them, and immediately I'm just like, ugh, disgusting. I think that was the case with my office and just all of the new products and furniture that I had. I don't know if it was just the smell of that. Couldn't stand it in those first few weeks. I did primarily work from my bed. If I wasn't on an active call that had to have my face, I was sitting in bed on my laptop. Now, another thing that was so much better is that I had less severe nausea overall in this pregnancy. Now, I'm not someone who gets super nauseated or throws up a lot in pregnancy, but in baby number 2, I most definitely was very nauseated from about 6 to 12 weeks. And I was worried that would be the case again, and it was not. I definitely think part of why I was so sick with that second pregnancy is because I was way more depleted going into that second pregnancy. I was still breastfeeding when I conceived, and I was less than a year postpartum, so my body definitely was not in the most ideal place to conceive again, and I think that's why I felt so much worse early on. This time, because I had prioritized my nutrients, my gut health, my minerals leading up to this pregnancy, I think that definitely helped with having less severe nausea. And all this to say, for most women, there's always going to be some degree of not feeling great, feeling a little bit blah, feeling tired. And that is completely normal. It is a normal adaptation to your body creating and accepting a baby and your hormones rising. And I definitely had my moments of, I do not feel great. However, I will say this was so much better than my last pregnancy. The one thing that wasn't super great, at around 10 weeks pregnant, our entire family got some type of respiratory bug, and we were producing a lot of mucus during that time, so I actually got really gaggy around that time, and that lasted for a few weeks, which wasn't fantastic. I just gagged a lot, but still, it was like random. It wasn't associated with nausea, I was just gagging. I will say one thing that I do think also really helped with the nausea. Like I said, I did not have the food aversions to eggs or to meat. So early on in pregnancy, I was still able to get my protein intake in. And that has a huge impact on our nausea and our blood sugar control, which blood sugar spikes can cause more nausea as well. So the fact that I was still able to tolerate a lot of those foods really helped. And I do think that getting my gut in a good place before pregnancy, balancing my minerals, and having those habits of eating a protein-rich diet spread throughout the day really helped going into this baby number 3. Now for a super not as great aspect in this pregnancy, I have been a lot more anxious. And I will just say that more knowledge does not bring more peace. For me, I think it's done the opposite. Having access to more information, more labs, knowing a lot more about my body, knowing a lot about women's health in general, and knowing what can go wrong has caused me to have a lot more anxiety early on in this pregnancy. I know of so many factors that can impact how your body accepts implantation, how your body can sometimes reject sperm or a growing embryo because it is partially foreign, and how your immune system can attack that. And I'll explain some of the testing that I did before pregnancy to look into some of this, but knowing that I had higher inflammatory markers and higher immune activation before trying to conceive, that was always in the back of my mind of, what if my body isn't quite ready and it's going to reject this embryo? So definitely a lot more anxiety because of that. Having that more knowledge didn't necessarily bring me more peace. And I will say in this pregnancy, compared to the first time I got pregnant and even the second time, I just have worked with a lot more women who had previously experienced pregnancy loss, and those stories just become much more top of mind for me during pregnancy. And I am just much more aware of how fragile pregnancy is and can feel, and just had a lot more anxious thoughts creeping in despite doing all the right things, because I know so much of miscarriages, if there are genetic components, that is out of your control, and it doesn't matter how prepared you were beforehand. Sometimes it truly isn't up to us. And I just kept having this recurring thought of, who am I to have 3 perfectly healthy pregnancies when so many wonderful moms that I work with don't? So that has just been something on my mind this whole time. So the emotional side of pregnancy doesn't just disappear just because you prepared yourself really well physically. And supporting my nervous system has been really important for supporting that anxiety and just the general unease over well. And I will say it has definitely subsided over the past few weeks, especially now having told people that I am pregnant. It has helped a lot. Okay, so now let's get into what I actually did before pregnancy, heading into trying to conceive, all that good stuff. So I did my own comprehensive lab work. This is the same lab work that I do for one-on-one clients inside of Nourish Moms Collective when they want to do a full workup. So this goes beyond just standard blood testing that you would get at a doctor's office. So first and foremost, I did mineral testing. I actually weaned my son from breastfeeding after he turned 1, and I wanted to give my body a little bit of time to really replenish before trying to conceive. So that is when I ran my first mineral test after weaning him. In that mineral test, it's one I've talked about a lot, but you take a small hair sample, send it to the lab, and it analyzes over 35 mineral nutrients, heavy metals, toxic elements, and mineral ratios. So it tells us a lot about our depletion patterns, our stress, how our body's handling stress or not handling stress, how we're utilizing the nutrients that we have, and where you could still be really depleted. And there are specific factors that I look at that impact fertility, particularly with our sodium and our potassium, our calcium and our magnesium ratios, and our overall nutrient status. I also ran a GI map to look at my gut, and I didn't have really crazy gut symptoms with like bloating or constipation or diarrhea, but I know that so much of our immune system resides in our gut, so I wanted to see what was going on there. So specifically looking at my immune system, inflammation, and then just digestive markers overall, because that is so important to how our body absorbs the nutrients that we give it and can play a big role in our hormone signaling. And with that, I also did do a functional hormone test. I did a Dutch hormone test, so it's different than just a cycle day 21 blood draw where we're looking at markers on that day. It shows us all of our sex hormones and their metabolites, so how your body is utilizing those hormones, how they're breaking down those hormones, and it goes a step deeper so we can actually see if there's any issues going on under the surface. I was really interested in this, especially after weaning breastfeeding, because I wanted to make sure that I had adequate progesterone to support implantation and early pregnancy and good hormone levels overall. So what did those labs show? Well, starting with my minerals, I was definitely depleted with overworked adrenals, which was not super surprising given the back-to-back kiddos, 2 under 2, the extended breastfeeding work, all of that stuff. With my gut test, it actually showed an overactive immune response, which I know is very important to try and get under control as you are trying to conceive, because I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but your body can reject the sperm or an embryo that is half foreign if it thinks that it's an attack to your immune system. And so having an overactive immune response is not ideal. Having an underactive immune response is not ideal either. I see either high or either really low in a lot of my fertility clients, so we want to correct that. It also showed some higher inflammation in my body, which I was actually not super surprised by, but I wanted to get that under control. And overall, though, nothing was like inherently super bad or crazy red flags or major issues. I had some areas that needed support before I felt comfortable trying to conceive, so I gave myself a good 3 months of trying to support my gut, supporting my mineral status, making sure my hormones and my menstrual cycle was nice and healthy before we started trying. And I do think that a lot of that work that I put in before is part of why this current pregnancy has felt so different than my last. And so what exactly did that actually look like? Well, this intentional replenishment, like I said, I spent about 3 months really focused on my mineral replenishment. I actually ordered a custom mineral blend like I do for some of my clients. It is a customized supplement based on what we find in all of those test results, which is a really great way to remineralize your body without taking 20 different products. And it is built directly for my body with my mineral status, my gut health. I also did take a couple gut-specific supplements to help with my immune response and with my digestive markers. I think I have some videos from back in January and February explaining. I was actually taking a lot of supplements during this time, and it was only temporary. I was really prioritizing nourishing my body and having consistent protein intake, consistent fiber intake, trying to get some good color with fruits and vegetables in my diet. And I should probably say, I did put my husband on like a men's prenatal vitamin during this time as well, so that we were both preparing together. In fact, I actually did do all of his testing too, just to make sure that he was going to be healthy too, because the men's health really does impact 50% of your pregnancy. But overall, I was really trying to support my adrenals, lower inflammation, and create an environment that a baby would be healthy and comfortable and could easily grow in. Now, just a little bit of reflection before my second baby. Like I said, I was still breastfeeding when I became pregnant. I only spent a few months intentionally replenishing. It was really around the 6-7 month mark when I became super intentional with replenishing before that second baby. I didn't look at all of the labs though before trying for my second baby, so it wasn't as targeted of support during that time. And I most definitely was like survival mode those first 6 months after I had my daughter. So it was not a full year of trying to replenish my body, which was the case with this third pregnancy. Coming out of giving birth with my second, I knew I needed to be much more intentional in how I was preparing for my third. I needed more nourishment beforehand, and I wanted to feel physically stronger going into the third pregnancy. And like I said, I really do feel confident that the preparation I put into preparing for number 3 has helped with a lot of the symptoms, specifically the less nausea, the fewer aversions, and just being able to tolerate a lot more in my first trimester. Now, I will say, and this is one that I probably don't really have any control over, and I don't hear a lot of people talking about it, but I seem to have really severe pelvic pain that I am just now starting to realize isn't always the most normal in pregnancy. It's more pelvic girdle, symphysis pubic pain, where I'm getting to the point where when I go to my workout class, I can't even do any single leg movements, lunges, anything single leg that kind of like shifts the pelvis out of alignment causes actual pain in my pubic bone area, which I did experience in my other 2 pregnancies, though definitely later on. It did start very early in this pregnancy, so that's something that has not been ideal, and I just have to be a lot more mindful about the exercises that I do. I do have some physical therapy exercises and stretches that I can do, but overall I do feel like my physical limitations have caught on a little bit sooner in this baby number 3, which does make sense because now the third time around things are a lot more stretched than they were compared to the last 2. So it is just one of those things that I am working through and dealing with. Another thing that I will actually say about this pregnancy is that as of right now, I don't feel like I am quite as on top of my protein and fiber intake as I was in my last 2 pregnancies. Life has just been a little bit busier and it hasn't been quite as top of mind. And even with that, I do still feel better physically than I did in my last pregnancy from a sickness, heartburn, energy standpoint. So if you are a mom, you know that you want to have another baby. I cannot stress enough how important this in-between season is and how much more attention you do need to give it, because it will have a big impact on how your next pregnancy goes. Your recovery from your past pregnancy, your replenishment right now most definitely is going to impact future pregnancies. So preparing your body beforehand, it seriously might change your pregnancy experience significantly, especially if you are someone who is prone to being super duper sick. I think any little thing that's going to help minimize that sickness is going to be worth it. For those of you who are interested in the testing that we do inside of Nourish Moms Collective, you can get more details at nourishmomscollective.com, and we can chat and see if it's the right fit for you. But next week, I'm actually going to answer one of the most common questions that I get from postpartum moms, which is, my period still hasn't come back. Is this normal? I want to get pregnant soon. How do I get my period back? So stay tuned.